Okay, let's continue with the review of game 203. So I'm starting as dealer with this hand. Now we have a guest wind here which we can't use to gain an extra hand even when we have 3 of it, so it's logical to throw this first and ensure the non-player doesn't pawn it. I think everything was pretty clear in this game. Next turn we deal the 1. Again, we want to hold on to these bonus tiles in case we draw an extra one of them. Then we can get an extra hand. And not only do we get 2 hand if we get a triplet of Ton, but it's also a Dora, so we definitely want to hold on to this for as long as we can. What do we mean by as long as we can? Well, as long as we can fulfill our criteria of 5 groups without sacrificing too much tile efficiency. So we're definitely going to have a triplet of Hatsu. And looks like 3 is our pair, so we have 1 group, 2 groups. We already have 3, 4, 5 groups actually. So even without really holding on to any other cards in our hand, any other tiles in our hand, we already have 5 groups set out for us, so we can hold on to these for quite long. So until we draw the 7 pin and the 4 man, and then we have to discard the 7 so, and then only then do we start discarding these bonus tiles here. So next turn, now before the draw, I was planning to throw the Haku because 1 Haku came out, but we drew the second Haku, so that's good. So here's one critical point in this round. Do we throw the 7 or do we throw the Ton? Now from a tile efficiency point of view, dealing the Ton is best, so that if something sticks to the 7, so let's say we get a 6 or we get an 8 so, then we can keep that Rianman weight and throw away the Penchan weight, so we can upgrade our bad weights to good weights by keeping floating middle tiles like the 7. Of course, we can also hold on to the Ton and hope to get more Han into our hand. And if we manage to win with a triplet of Haku, a triplet of Hatsu, and a triplet of Ton, we'll have a game-winning hand. So a few considerations here. What's the risk and reward? Basically, every decision you make in Mahjong boils down to risk and reward. Now, in a Tonpu Sen, like I said earlier, you need to win hands. It's not so important that you win really, really big hands, because really, really big hands are a product of really, really good luck in a Tonpu Sen. Because in a Tonpu Sen, everyone is going for a win in every game, because it's a short game and everyone knows they need to win at least 1 hand or they have a good chance of ending up in last place. So with everyone going for a win, it's not really wise to delay your hand by sacrificing tile efficiency too much. So what's the balancing point? Well, normally in a Tonpu Sen, your ideal hand is around 3900 points. So a hand with 3 Han is basically all you really need in a Tonpu Sen. So once we have a triplet of Haku, a triplet of Hatsu, and a red 5, that's our 3 Han for us right there. And we don't really need any other firepower really to win a Tonpu Sen. Now, especially when we're the leader, when we're leading the Tonpu Sen by 3-9 to the second and third place guys, and 7-8 to the last place guy, it's not that critical that we win a humongous hand. Now, you still will try to make your hand at least 3 Han. Now, you don't want to be winning 1,000-point hands as dealer and Ren Chaning on 1,000 points necessarily, because that just gives an extra round for the other guys to make a big hand. So you still want to get your hands to a reasonable size. Like I said, 3 Han is about what you should be aiming for in a Tonpu Sen. So with that in mind, and because we're dealer, we also don't want other people to get a pawn of the Dora. So with those considerations in mind, I dealt the Ton here, and I think it's the correct play. Obviously the other people who are trying to get out of last place and trying to improve their placing will hold on to the Ton for as long as possible and hope that they can get 2 Tons in their hand. So before that happens, we want to throw the Ton as early as possible once we get our 3 Han in our hand, so that they don't get a pawn of the Dora. So here I think throwing the Ton is the best play. It enables us to go for the win as efficiently as possible, while still retaining the right size we want for our hands. Size in terms of points. So there we go, we pawn the Hatsu, and the 7 is the floating tile we deal. Everything here looks okay, except maybe 1 point. Yes, this point here. Now, at this point, we have 2 choices. Well, we'll consider 3 choices here. The 3 choices are: we can discard the 6 we just drew, we can discard the 8 pin, or we can discard the Chun. Obviously we don't discard any other ones because we need another 3 groups in our hands. We've got 1, 2, we need another 3. Now, in a situation like this where we've already called tiles, obviously we're not really averse to calling more tiles. If things come which we can call, then that's great, we call them. So we'll call, if we throw the 6, we'll definitely call a 7 from this guy and chi a 7 pin. But we can only cheat from this guy, not one of these guys here. So now dealing the 6 and dealing the 8 are both equivalent in terms of tile acceptance. So if we deal the 6, we can accept a 7, and there are 4 sevens left in the game. We haven't seen any 7 pin yet. And whereas if we deal the 8, we can accept 2 6 pins and also 2 3 sows in our hand. So those two are equivalent from an acceptance tile count point of view. But however, of course, if we throw the 8, then that allows us to pawn from these guys as well. Whereas if we throw the 6, we can only chi from this guy or draw the 7 ourselves. And we can't pawn the 3 because the 3 will need to stay as our pair in that case. So throwing the 8 is clearly better than throwing the 6. Now it's a question of comparing throwing the 8 with throwing the chun. Now why did I want to keep the chun in the first place? Well, because if I get 2 chuns, then I get a Shousan Gen. And if I manage to get 3 chuns, if I draw another chun and I manage to pawn a chun, then that gives me Daisan Gen, which is a guaranteed game-winning hand. So like I said earlier, it's all about risk and reward here. The risk of keeping the chun is that I miss out on the 7s that I could draw myself or chi from this guy. However, the rewards I get from keeping the chun over the 8 pin are a potential to have a game-winning hand. So in this case, I judged keeping the chun as having a greater reward than tile efficiency. And I think that's correct. And another reason why is, let's say I'm holding 1 chun, right? What if all the other players are also holding 1 chun? Then in that case, all of us are holding 1 chun, but all these 3 guys will never deal the chun from their hand, because from their point of view, they can't see whether I have 2 chuns or not. And of course, if they deal the chun and I pawn it, then they're liable for the payment of Daisan Gen. So in case you didn't know that, if someone pawns 2 things in a Daisan Gen, and then you throw the 3rd thing in the Daisan Gen and I pawn it, then if I win a Tsumo, you have to pay the entire amount rather than all 3 players paying a 3rd of the Tsumo amount. You actually have to pay the entire amount for the Tsumo. And in case of a Ron, then if let's say this guy deals in while you were the one who threw the chun for me to pawn, then in the normal case, of course, this guy has to pay everything, but because you threw the chun, you actually have to pay half. So in that case, you pay half and this guy pays half. That's the Pao rule. So that's why holding the chun is not so big of a slowdown to me, because it also slows them down if they are holding 1 chun as well. So with those things in mind, I think keeping the chun here is the correct play. Although there is a small chance I could be wrong. Maybe the tile efficiency play of discarding the chun still has merit, but I think discarding the 8 pin is correct here. Okay, so I got the 6. So now it's time to pawn the 6, and now of course I go into Tenpai. And this guy was holding 2 chuns anyway. So I think the rest of this game was pretty straightforward. Maintain my Tenpai and upgrade it to the better weight. Okay, so we'll move on to the next round here. East 2 with 1 Honba. Okay, so all of this was pretty straightforward. Throw the guess wins, and here of course I made the terrible error while I was explaining the reasoning behind throwing your Shimo-Cha's guess win first and then your Toyman's guess win. I was completely stuck in my head, and I completely missed the fact that there were actually 3 chuns out on the board and no Haku. So I have no idea why I actually dealt the Haku here. Just a case of concentrating on too many things at once and not being able to multitask really. So here, of course, the correct discard is the chun. I can't use it in my hand, and I want to hold on to the value tiles for as long as possible. All this looks alright. Okay, so up to this one now. This discard. So Tonpu Sens are tricky because not only do you have to concentrate on your own hand, but when other people start getting into Tenpai, when you start suspecting other people are in Tenpai, you also have to watch their hands as well. So that's where Tonpu Sens get very tricky. With that in mind, I was quite focused on keeping safe cards against my Kami-cha and trying to balance the act of advancing my hand while holding as many safe cards as possible. So the consideration of keeping as many safe cards as possible was what led me to throw the 2 here, because I'm still very far away from Tenpai, and I was just so focused on, okay, I need to keep as many different cards in my hand as possible to avoid the situation where I'm stuck with no safe cards to play. So I kept the 1, which was a safe card, and dealt the 2. Of course, that doesn't look like the efficient discard now that I look at it. So let's apply our 5 groups theory to see what the efficient discard is here in this case. So that's 1 group here, definitely. Start with the Manzu next. So 2, and this looks like 3. So 3 groups here, and 4, 5. So this looks like 2. So there's a definite 4, 5, 6 plus a 2, 4, 6. That's the best way to think of this one here. It's a 4, 5, 6 plus a 2, 4, 6. So the 2, 4, 6 is a pretty good shape. And 4, 5, 6 is also, of course, a good shape. And 2, 3 is a good shape. So now it's a question of these 2 then. So it looks like we deal 1 tile out of this group here, out of the 1, 2, 2, 4. And that also fits in with the general guideline. I won't call it a rule, I'll call it a guideline, but the guideline is that you should have, usually you should have 3 tiles in every group. Now that makes sense because your groups in the end will be 4 groups of 3 and 1 group of 2. So your groups should have 3 in them usually. That makes for the best case. So now we don't have our pair yet in any of these groups. So in the 4, 5, 6 plus the 2, 4, 6, we don't really have the pair. If you think of it as 2, 4, 4 plus 5, 6, 6, then you have 2 pairs. But in that case, the 2, 4, 4 isn't a confirmed set of 3, and the 5, 6, 6 isn't a confirmed set of 3. So you're waiting for 2 different things to complete themselves, and that's not efficient. So the efficient way to think of it is as a 4, 5, 6 plus a 2, 4, 6. Then you're only waiting for either a 3 or a 5 to complete those 2 groups. So using the 5-group methodology and the fact that we need to keep the pair of 2s, our most efficient discard has to be the 1-man or the 4-man. So we can check that. Again, let's go to our Tenho tile efficiency calculator, enter our hand in 22489. There we go. And yes, we can see that both the 4-man and the 1-man are the most efficient discards. So there's actually no difference between the 4-man and the 1-man. And well, from a point of view of tile acceptance, but of course, if you deal the 1, if you deal the 1-man, then if you, let's say you draw the 5-man next, then your 5 can stick to the 4, and you can keep that Rhiannon weight of 4, 5 and throw away the Penchan weight of 8, 9. So keeping the 4 over the 1 has its benefits in terms of efficiency, but from a defensive point of view, from the point of view that you want to keep as many safe tiles as possible, then of course keeping the 1-man over the 4-man has its advantages as well. So in this case, my original discard of 2-man is not correct now. Well, yes, it's definitely not correct because we still want to be pushing this and not giving up on this hand too easily. Well, why do we still want to push? Well, sort of anyway. We still want to sort of push against this guy. We don't want to be too reckless, but we also still want to not sacrifice winning chances unnecessarily. Okay, and as to the case of whether he's in Tenpai or not, now normally when this triple Yakuhai is not a Dora, so let's say the Dora wasn't Haku and he pawned it, then you have to be careful from a speed point of view. So you have to be careful from a speed point of view. If he pawns something, then he's quite likely to be in Tenpai if it's not the Dora. Because you would only pawn a Yakuhai if you have either a cheap and fast hand or a strong and slow hand. You usually don't want to pawn a Yakuhai when you have a slow and a cheap hand. Of course, there are many considerations to that. Like, if it's the last round, for example, if it's the East 4 round, and you're in last place, and you're trailing by only, let's say, 500 points, then it makes sense to go for a pawn of the Yakuhai, even if your hand is still cheap and slow, because that's the fastest way you can advance your hand to Tenpai. And you only have the last round to get out of last place. But now it's still considered early in the round, so there's not much pressure on him to win a cheap and slow hand. And of course, he has no real desire to stop me from Renchaning. So if I wasn't the dealer in this case, if one of the other two guys here were the dealer, then he would have more of an incentive to try and race them, because he doesn't want them to Renchan and put him further behind in the standings, further behind in the placements. But because I'm the one who's the dealer and I'm quite far ahead, he has no real reason to pawn with a cheap and slow hand. Okay, so that's the case where that Haku wasn't the Dora. So if it's not the Dora, then this pawn might signal that he's in Tenpai. But since the Haku is a Dora, then now it's a lot more likely that his hand is slow, because he would pawn it even if his hand is slow, to aim for a high scoring hand and to deter the other players. It's a bit like poker, actually. Now, one of the things about playing poker is that if you watch people who play poker well, they know how to put their opponents on a range. So this act of putting your opponents on a range is quite second nature to good poker players. And that's something which I haven't seen people talk about in Mahjong. I've never seen that idea of putting your opponent on a range, but I think it's quite useful. So if the Haku was not the Dora, then the range of your opponent is most likely cheap and fast or strong and fast. It's not going to be strong and slow, because this is not the Dora. So where's all his value coming from? And it's definitely very, 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 very unlikely to be cheap and slow. It might not be impossible, because he might be a bad player and pawning it just for the sake of pawning it, but if he chooses to play in the Jokyo table, then you can reasonably assume that he's not that bad. So if the Haku was not the Dora, then we would put our opponent on a range of being very close to Tenpai, a tight range in terms of speed to Tenpai. But here, because the Haku is the Dora, then his range of speed to Tenpai is actually quite wide. he might be in Tenpai, he might be far from Tenpai, you don't know. So in terms of speed to Tenpai, it's not that dangerous. That's what I mean by it wasn't so dangerous in terms of speed to Tenpai. But of course it's dangerous in terms of score. If you deal into him, he has 4 Han, and that's a Mangan hand, or at least a 7-7 hand, which is virtually Mangan anyway. So I like to call those virtual Mangan hands. So because he's on a wide range for speed to Tenpai, you can still risk throwing dangerous cards against him. But you want to keep safe cards for later when he's, his range of being near to Tenpai, gets narrower. So when his range of speed to Tenpai gets narrower, as he gets more and more likely to be closer to Tenpai, then you want to deal safe cards. So what we aim to do now is to deal dangerous cards first and then keep the safe cards for later. So coupling that with our consideration for efficiency, the best deal here seems to be the 4-man. So now, looking at it from a calm point of view, without the clock ticking away, I'd say my best discard here is the 4-man, and my 2-man is definitely wrong. Okay. And this round had a lot of interesting decisions. Now, okay, so he's cheated on a Ryanman weight, and I think during the game I said that a cheat on a Ryanman weight means he's very likely to be in Tenpai. I take those words back. I wouldn't say very likely. I would say if he cheats on a Ryanman weight after having pawned a Yakuhai, he's quite likely to be in Tenpai. I wouldn't say very likely anymore. Quite likely. Calling three sets, calling 3 times is a much better indication of being in Tenpai. So if he calls 3 times, then I would say he's very likely to be in Tenpai. But calling on a Ryanman weight is quite likely. So, well, I don't want to put any figures. I don't want to put any actual figures to what I'm saying. Like, there's a this % chance of him being in Tenpai, and there's a this % chance of him being 1 away from Tenpai. Because I don't have a good feel for those sorts of figures, and even if I did, if I tell those figures to you, you won't necessarily have a good feel for them either. But I would say if he calls on a Ryanman weight, he's quite likely to be in Tenpai, like more so than if he didn't call this, or if he called on a Kanchan weight. So in this case, in this turn of mine, I was actually very fixated on his hand again. Too fixated on his hand and not really looking at my hand. And I dealt the 2-pin here because I was thinking, okay, I need to keep as many safe cards as I need to, because he's cheat on this, he's a bit more likely to be in Tenpai, so now I need to start dealing safe cards against him. So the 2 came out and I thought, okay, safe cards against him are 2 and 1. So next turn I should deal the 2. But actually 2 is safe against both my Shimocha and my Kamicha, whereas 8 is only safe against my Kamicha. So I should have thrown the 8 I just drew, but I was too fixated on throwing the 2. So 8 was a better discard there. So here, now he's called 3 times. Now this is a indication that he's very likely to be in Tenpai. The act of calling 3 times usually means that he's in Tenpai. So now with him very likely in Tenpai, I will start going into better Ori mode and only deal safe cards against him. So deal the 8, so in the end the order of 2 and 8 didn't cost me anything, which is lucky. So I'm dealing safe cards against him. Right. So in this turn I ran out of safe cards. I ran out of Genbutsu to throw against my Kamicha. So now we have an interesting question. So obviously the things to throw are the things we want to throw where he has the least chance of waiting on are usually the terminal cards or word tiles. Now, if this was a guest win for him, so if it was the Xia, I would throw the Xia. But because it's a pay, that risks dealing into a weight, a Shanpon weight of pay for him. Now 1 pay is already out, so that reduces the risk somewhat, but the risk is still there. Of course, if 2 pays were out, I would definitely throw the pay. But with only 1 pay out, it's a difficult decision. Now, so what makes it a difficult decision? Actually, it's this Dora here. Now, if I couldn't see this Dora, let's say this 5 was a normal 5 and not a red 5, then I would be quite comfortable with throwing the pay here. Why? Because, well, how many Han does he have? He has 1 from the Yakuhai and another 3 from the Dora. So he has 4 Han. And the difference between 4 Han and 5 Han, so if this is not a red 5 and I deal with the pay, then that changes his hand from 4 Han to 5 Han, which is not that big a deal. So of course, assuming there are no other Dora or Yaku in his hand, there can't be any more Yaku in his hand. Well, except for the case of another Yakuhai and a Tanki weight on the pay. But if it's a Shanpon weight, then there's no other Yakuhai in his hand, and there's no other way he can get an extra Han except from a Dora. So in that situation, when this is not a red 5, I would dealing in with the pay would only increase his hand from 4 Han to 5 Han. So that would only cost me 300 points. So his hand changes from a 7,7 to a 8,000 hand. So from 7,700 to 8,000. So it's virtually no difference. Whereas now if I deal in with the pay, his hand changes from 5 Han to 6 Han. So it goes from Mangan to Haneman. So from 8,000 to 12,000. So the extra Han will potentially cost me an extra 4,000 points. So that's why I was hesitating very much to deal with the pay. To deal the pay here. So, since this 5 is a red 5, I don't know what is the correct discard here. Do I throw the 9 and risk having a more likely chance of dealing in? So not only do I deal into Tang Ki weights and Shanpon weights, but I also deal into Ranmen weights. Or do I risk dealing in with the pay and that's less of a chance of being a weight for him, but it would cost me more. Now we can also look at the scores on the board, of course. Dealing into a 8,000 hand or a 7,700 hand would still keep me in second place, whereas dealing into a 12,000 hand would put me in third place and in considerable danger. But of course, in both cases, I don't really have much chance of fighting for first place. He would definitely be the favorite for first place in both those cases. And now I'm also thinking that making all these score calculations at the board during the game is very, very difficult, having to keep track of all these things. So perhaps this card I won't answer definitely. I'm not sure whether dealing the 9 pin or dealing the pay here is best. I think I'll leave that for later when I get more experience, or perhaps someone more experienced will come along and help me answer this question. So I'll leave that. And so now in my mind, here again there was the question of what do I deal, and do I deal the pay or something else? So in my mind it was the choice between pay and 9 man, but actually that's not right. I had something else I could have dealt. Can you see what that is? What else could I have dealt besides pay or 9 man? And the answer is this 6 pin. Well, of course 9 makes a Ranmen weight of 7 and 8 pin impossible, because if that would put him in Furi 10. No, it wouldn't put him in Furi 10, but it would be illogical, because why pass on the 9 when you could run from the 6 instead? But okay, let's see if you were watching carefully. Observe when he threw this 3, what happened next. So it was a Tsumogiri, another Tsumogiri, another Tsumogiri. So 3 pin is still a safe card against him at this point in time. And of course during the game I didn't actually notice that. I didn't notice that after he dealt the 3 pin, he dealt 3 consecutive sumogiris in a row. And therefore, right now at this moment, his hand is not waiting for a 3 pin or a 9 pin, which means 6 is actually a double Tsuji. And the double Tsuji is actually safer than the 9 man. So the choice here is actually not between the 9 man and the pei, it's between the 6 pin and the pei. So if I had seen that, I would definitely have thrown the 6 pin here. If I had seen that, definitely. And of course it's the consistent choice, so if I believe that throwing the 9 pin over the pei was correct last turn, then throwing the 6 pin here is the correct play. But I didn't see that. So instead I chose what I thought was the consistent choice of throwing the 9 man here. And I dealt in. So I actually made quite a lot of mistakes in that round, some of which, like the 6, like discarding the 9 man instead of the 6 pin, weren't obvious at all. You'd have to be playing at a very high level, taking in all the information on the board, both subconsciously as well as consciously together, in order to make those kinds of plays. And that is something which I'm working towards. It's definitely achievable with practice. So let's move on to the next round. Okay. Now again, during the game I didn't see that Nan was the Doran, so I dealt it instantly. It still might be the correct play. Excuse me. Now, in this situation, throwing any one of these 3 cards, the Wanso, the Nan, or the Ton, has merits. So you can consider throwing any one of these 3. Of course, from a tile efficiency point of view, you can throw that as well, but what makes this not a good throw? Well, compare the Haku and the Ton. Which discard is better? Well, Ton can be used as a Yakuhai by all of us, and so can the Haku. However, Ton gives 2 hand to the dealer, whereas it only gives the other players 1 hand. So you want to throw the Ton as fast as possible compared to the Haku, so that our dealer over here has less chance of pawning it. So that reasoning would apply. So even if I couldn't see this Ton, so let's say this was something else, so that there are 3 Tons and 3 Hakus I can't see. Or let's say this guy over here dealt Haku as his first card instead of Xia. Then that reasoning would still make Ton the better throw, or the better discard over the Haku. So we can eliminate the Haku from our list of potential discards, and we want to throw either the Wanso, the Nan, or the Ton. So again, you have to look at risks and reward, or pros and cons. So the advantages of keeping the 1 so are greater efficiency. So it can stick to the 2 so and 3 so as well. The advantages of keeping the nan are the fact that we can use it as Dora in our hand potentially later on. Now, whenever you are looking at keeping Dora or throwing Dora away, I like to use the my own term I call volatility. So keeping the Dora makes the volatility of the game increase. So it makes it more likely that one of us will eventually end up with a triplet of Dora, or even a pair of Dora in a closed hand. Whereas throwing it away reduces the volatility somewhat. So when you're clearly ahead, when you're in first place by a lot, you want to reduce volatility on the board. And when you're clearly behind in last place, you want to increase volatility by as much as possible. But when you're in second place, you need to consider what's the distance between you and the other players. So because we're far away from the last place guy, we can consider keeping the Dora. And because we also need it we might need it to overcome the first place guy. If let's say we were only trailing the leader by 1,000 points, then we want to throw the nan away, definitely, because we don't want this guy to pawn a nan of Dora and a Yakuhai of nan and allow him to make a comeback. So if the leader was only leading me by 1,000 points, then of course we don't need a big hand to overcome the leader. We just need to win a hand as fast as possible. And while at the same time not allowing the last place guy to win a hand. So, but because the leader is quite some distance away, we can consider keeping Dora. Now, another consideration to make is actually the fact that different players on Tenho, if they have different ranks, their priorities will be different. So, like right now at a showdown level, last place doesn't really cost me a lot. Of course, the higher up you go on Tenho, the higher your rank is, the more points you lose when you go into last place. So last place avoidance is very important when you start ranking up to high ranks on Tenho. So if my rank was higher, well, definitely if I was 3 dan and 4 dan, I would be very concerned and make sure the last place player doesn't have a chance of getting back into the game. So if I was 3 or 4 dan, I think I would definitely throw the nan as well to avoid the last place guy making a comeback. But because I'm showdown, I can afford to relax a bit in that respect. And of course, Ton, discarding the Ton the disadvantage is we can't keep an extra Han in our hand, but we prevent the dealer, who is only trailing us by 1004, we prevent the dealer from pawning a double taunt. So those are the 3 tiles we might deal. We can consider dealing. I think the Nan is not a bad discard. Here. Excuse me for the long silence. I still can't make up my mind as to which discard would be better. I guess that's one of the things about looking at the game from the calmness of no time limits. You also tend to overthink things, potentially, but thinking about things also helps you to make sure you don't overlook things you might have overlooked if you were acting by reflex. Now, I'd say the Nan is a pretty good play. I'm not sure if it's the best play, but it would be the play I would do again in this situation if it came up. Keeping this guy in last place and making sure he doesn't pawn his Yakuhai, I think, is a pretty important thing. Preventing our Kami-cha from getting a useful Ren-chan is also quite high in priority. So throwing the Ton would also be one of the choices I would consider here. I think discarding the Wanso is a little less good than those 2 choices. But that's just my feeling. I'm not entirely sure. But I would make the Nan discard again if I had the choice. Okay, I think the only other place in this game was the only other difficult decision I had here in this game was this turn here, when I drew the 7 and got into Tenpai. Now during the game I said Ricci was definitely correct. I take that back now. Ricci reaching here was not definitely correct. I'll reword my statement a bit. Okay. I'll change my statement to this. If I was committed to throwing the 6 man here, so if I was committed to throwing the 6 man, then reaching is correct. Now, of course, I have a bad weight, a very bad weight. It's a Kan-Chan weight where I can already see 2 of my winning tiles. But I do have 1 Dora, so with Ricci and 1 Dora, that's enough. If you have no Dora at all, so if it's a Ricci only hand, then in general you might want to not Ricci if you're not the dealer. So again, if it's a Ricci only hand and you're not a dealer and you're waiting for, and your weight is bad, so you're waiting for only 1 card, 1 type of card, then you can consider not reaching. And you probably should not reaching, but because I have a Dora, then reaching is correct, because here the only tile which improves my weight is a 5 pin, and it's quite unlikely that I'll get the improved weight. So if you have a bad weight and you're not dealer, but you do have 1 Dora, then if you get into Tenpai, you should just Ricci instantly. However, there was one other thing I could have done. So what I could have done in this case was not go into Tenpai. I mean, that may sound a bit strange at first. Now, why would you want to not go into Tenpai when you can go into Tenpai? Well, the thing is that if your weight is bad and you're not the dealer, there's no real pressure for you to go into Tenpai. And to show that you're in Tenpai by reaching. So if you deal the 6, the only card which improves your Tenpai is a 5 pin. But now, let's imagine you don't deal the 6. Let's imagine that in this situation I deal the 2 pin instead. So that keeps me at 1 away from Tenpai. That keeps me at Ishan 10. But now look at what cards improve my hand. So not only does a 5 pin improve my hand and give me a good Tenpai, but also the 5 man and the 7 man would also give me good Tenpais. So that's the thing. If you want to stay in Dharma, if you want to stay in Dharma 10, if you don't want to Ricci, then sometimes the good play is to not go into Tenpai, to stay at 1 away from Tenpai. So that's a possibility here. And I would consider that possibility because my weight is extremely bad. Now, for example, if this 1, 2, 3, if this 1, 2, and 3 were Sozu instead of Pinzu, so if it was Sozu, and let's say this 3 was also Sozu, then I would Ricci and throw the 6th man here. So in that case I would be waiting for 4 3 pins which I can't see, but because this 1, 2 and 3 is Pinzu, and this 3 is also Pinzu, then I think, now that I think about it, I think reaching and throwing the 6 is not so good. So now if I had the choice, I would actually discard the 2 pin instead. So I think discarding the 2 pin is a better discard here. So I stay at 1 away from Tenpai, but I get the chance to improve my Tenpai to a better weight. So that's what I would do here. Deal the 2 pin. So after this Ricci, there were no difficult decisions left for me, of course. And just a small thing, I said in the game, during the game, that he was waiting for a 1 and 4 man as well as a 3 and 6 man, but that's not correct. He wasn't waiting for a 3 or a 6 man. I got confused by this 4-5-5-5, because if you have a 4-5-5-5 formation, you're waiting for 3, 6 and 4, but this is not a 4-5-5-5 formation. This is just a 2 and 3 Ranman wait. So his winning cards were only 1 man and 4 man. He wasn't waiting for a 6 or a 3. So we come to the last round of the game now. Now all along I've been emphasizing the fact that you should never underestimate the value of an extra Han, and how you should keep your bonus tiles for as long as possible, as long as you don't sacrifice much tile efficiency. Well, this is a situation where I dealt the bonus tile immediately. Well, for one thing, I don't have any isolated terminals, so all the 1s are connected to things. But the greater consideration here is that what do I actually need to get out of last place now? So I need to win a hand of at least 2 Han. If I win a 1 Han hand, so 1 Han and 30 Fu is the 1000-point hand. So I can't win a 1000-point hand against anybody, not even the 3rd place guy. Winning a 1000-point hand against him would still put me in last place. So I need to get more than 1 Han in my hand. And if I keep the Yakuhai, most likely I'll only end up with 1 Han, because I have no Dora at all in my hand. So the best thing to do here is to just forget about the Dora. Sorry, the Yakuhai. Forget about the Yakuhai and make our hand into a Ricci hand. So even if it becomes a Riichi hand, Riichi only hand, well, at least we might Tsumo our winning card and get Riichi and Tsumo. So that will be our 2-han right there. So that's our game plan for winning. We're aiming for Riichi and Tsumo with this hand. If we draw any other Dora, then that's great. And we can aim to take out the 3rd place guy as well. But in general, we're just aiming, we can aim to take out the 2nd place guy as well, but in general, we're just aiming to get a 2-han hand to take out the 3rd place guy, and we're going for Riichi and Tsumo. So, want to keep this hand closed, and want to keep it as efficient as possible. So right here, on the 2nd turn, how do we keep things as efficient as possible? So remember our 5-group theory. So we now have one group here, and the 4-4-6 now forms the 2nd group. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we already have 4 groups here, and we can throw one of these floating tiles. Now, which one do we throw? Well, there is some overlap here, you see. The 5 so would go well with the 4 so. And the 5 so would also go well with the 7. So there's overlap between these two. Whereas there's no overlap with this 7. So you want to keep the 7 pin, and you want to throw one of the Sozus away. Now, which Sozu do you want to throw away? 4 can wait for 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. 7 can wait for 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. So if you had no further information other than your hand, those 2 discards would be equivalent. However, you have another piece of information here. The Dora is the 2 so. So you want to be able to incorporate the Dora in your hand in case it appears. So now it's clear that keeping the 4 so is correct, and discarding the 7 so is the best discard here in this hand. Obviously, my discard of 1 man was not correct. So in my mind, while I was playing this game, I thought, okay, I have two bad weights here. I have a 1-2 Pen-chan weight, and I have a 4-6 Kan-chan weight. So I draw a 4 so I can get rid of the 1. So that's what I was thinking. But of course, that's not what is the most efficient according to the 5-group theory. So let's just confirm the 5-group theory with the Tenho efficiency calculator, just to make sure the 5-group theory does indeed give the most efficient discard. So I have it here already. So 1, 2, 4, 6, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. There we go. So you can see here that yes, the discards which are most efficient from a tile acceptance point of view are the 4 and 7 so, like we concluded earlier. So 7 so was indeed the best discard there, allowing us to accept 62 tiles in total to get us from 2 away to 1 away, from Nishan-ten to Ishan-ten. have to remember that 2446 is a group of 1 really, which is not so hot. So a 2446 is really a substandard group of 1, whereas 12446 is a group of 2, which is not bad, even though the 1 2 is a Penchan weight at the edge of the board. And okay, this card here is interesting. After drawing the 5, I automatically discarded the 7. But that may not be correct actually. So we've got one group here, the 4 5. 1 2 3. Do you want to consider this 4 5 or 4? Well, 2 4 4 6 is really not much better than a group of 1. And we actually don't have a pair here. Yeah, so the fact is that 4 4 is most likely to be the pair we need in this case. So it may actually be better to get rid of the 2-man. 2-man I think is now the most efficient discard here. Let's check that. Who is it? Right, so this is still a 2-away hand. But dealing the 2-man gives the most tile acceptance. Yes. And also from a point of view of avoiding Furry 10, since I've already dealt the 1-man, I should deal the 2-man now to be consistent and avoid any possible Furry 10 situation. So again, I automatically discarded this 7 so by reflex, but it wasn't the best discard. 7 so only gives me 61,000 total, and some of them would put me in Furry 10 for the 1-man. Whereas discarding the 2-man was a good choice. So yeah. And that discard looks okay from an efficiency point of view. Of course, the question is whether I am concerned about dealing into him. Well, if I give up on my hand completely, there is a chance that the dealer will deal into him and go into last place, or that he might win a big sumo, and therefore my tournament falls into last place. But the chances of me dealing into him are quite low. And I still want to win a two-hand hand if possible, so I think I'm pretty sure not giving up on my hand is the correct play here. So that looks correct. Right, and in the end, it was my Kami-cha who dealt into him, and so I still remained in last place, even though it was a Mangan hand. So, this review actually took a lot longer than I expected. And I realized that I made a lot more mistakes than I thought I did, which is good. So I found lots of things I can improve on. And hopefully in the next game I won't make so many mistakes, and I'll play better, I'll have better luck, and you can see me rank up.